Welcome to the Red Letters Podcast. In this podcast, we explore topics that can be life transforming while delivering a message of hope. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Red Letters Podcast. As we closed out 2023, we were going through a topic at church, and it was talking about being like the light of the world. So we kind of want to chew on that topic today and kind of see what that means and how we could apply some of that to this up and coming year. Maybe there's a better choices you want to make to turn around and be a better influence to those around you and your family, your coworkers, friends. And what does that look like? What does it mean to be a light? Anybody want to take a stab at it?
Yeah. So I like the, I don't know if it's called analogy or the comparison illustration that you had up there where there was a light. There was actually a light, but one of the light bulbs was not plugged in, right? Mm-hmm. And the other one was, and it's like, so your question was, what is that? Your question was, how does that look?
Yeah. What is it like
for
to be
me,
a light?
it's like, yeah, you walk in a room and there's darkness, but if you carry that light, you brighten up that room, and people just naturally would know. I don't know, but I think if you're one of those light carriers, people just know that you are. You don't have to come in there and announce it. So that really, to me, that meant a lot, because it was like, oh, that's so true. Because you walk into, there's many places that you go in and you just feel the atmosphere. It's just off. But you being there, will you be transformed by what you're feeling, or will you be that one that tries to transform others? Yeah, by being that light. So yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess I'll explain the illustration a little bit. Yeah. We had a lamp on the stage, and then we pulled out a light bulb and kind of said that represents our life, and that electricity that runs through that light is actually our relationship with God. Yeah. So as we get connected to our source, which actually means Father, our Heavenly Father, once you screw in that light bulb, you have the relationship with God, and the fruit of it is that the light turns on within you. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times people go through life, trying to look good, looking like a light bulb, looking like you got purpose and you got foundation, you got it going on, but you actually don't, you're not on. Mm-hmm. And then there's those other people that turn around and like to be that flickering light bulb, where it's 1 minute you want to be screwed in. Oh yeah, everything's looking good. I'm doing all that. I go to church, I serve, I do all this other stuff. But then, Monday comes, and then you kind of let yourself not disconnect from the socket, because you don't want people to point the finger at you, but you just kind of let your life be unscrewed enough to where you're somewhat connected, but there's no power running through you. There's no relationship with God. You resemble what it looked like, but you're not there.
I think because I wasn't there, but me and Jess were watching. Me and Jess.
Saved you a seat.
I know. I mean, I honestly wish I was there in person, because me and Jess were in bed watching it, and half the time I was trying to be cool. I'm trying to learn how to not cry so obvious. So I'll be laying on her shoulder or something, and then just tears will just stream down. And so half the time when you got to the part where it was flickering, and mm-hmm. where the light, you could choose to when it's on and when it's off, and rather than just being that light. And a verse came to my head, Romans 8:19 through 22. It says, "The entire universe is standing on tiptoe, yearning to see the unveiling of God's glorious sons and daughters. For against its will, the universe itself has had to endure. For against its will, the universe itself has had to endure the empty futility resulting from the consequences of human sin." But the first part, where the creation is yearning for the glory of God to be seen through his sons and daughters. Mm-hmm. And that's that light that you were talking about, where, there's hope in that light, there's love in that light. And so many of us are in control of it, where we could, and that's why I think God has it set up where he's not forcing himself through us. Right. but we have the control whether God wants to show it or turn it off, you know? And so that whole analogy, I felt like it was so simple, but it got to me. And that's what I was thinking was that light. And that's what, a lot of, Christians, including me especially, I feel like we need to get to that point where we're not flickering,
And not only that, I think kind of one of the things that you're kind of leaning into is that we actually feel that we have the option.
Yeah.
We feel like we have the power to control that switch. Yeah. And to a certain degree, we do. But if you look at who all is in that picture, it's just you and God. Yeah. But yet you think you have options. Yeah. When we give our life to God, we didn't, we didn't have a multiple choice thing that he had to check off and abide by when we gave our life to him, but we treat him that way. And I think that's something that we got to really reconsider, that power we think we have and how we really abuse it.
I don't know if you shared the scripture that Wednesday regarding no one hides a lamp under a bucket.
No, that one.
No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. The thought that comes to mind is we're the ones who hide our light under baskets. We as people, and it could even be just the simplest thing of, I don't want to be the light around certain people. I don't want to be too bright to make them uncomfortable because light exposes. When you turn a light in a room, that's when everything is seen. But a lot of people, to make others feel good, will put a basket over because we're I'm not going to light right now, God, because I'm going to dim my light for the people around me because I don't want to make them uncomfortable. Yeah. But just like how the verse says, if the Lord's not putting a basket over you, why would we do it? But that's a thought that comes to mind from what you're saying, how it's we kind of, it's like a multiple choice.
Yeah. I think many times we become people pleasers instead of pleasing the one who that gave us life, and we're so quick to please the people that we see instead of the God that we can't see, in the physical realm. But can you read that verse again, the last part?
No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. Okay. In the house. How many, what came to mind is that in our own homes, no matter who you are listening or those of us in the room here, how many times do we turn around and avoid being a light when our home is right there? That it starts off there. At the end of the day, our spouses, they don't really want to see you and your attitude. Mm-hmm. They actually want to see this light. And many times they might not even agree with it. But if you're a light to your spouse, if you're a light to your kids, and you're a place of refuge, and you're not the type that's holier than thou, if you will, having that kind of attitude or kind of pointing the finger or talking down because you feel like you're closer to God than the other people. But if you realize that, hey, I'm actually trying to keep I'm trying to be a conduit of heaven here in my own home. Mm-hmm. And I think that at the end of the day, our spouses want to see God in us. Yeah. They won't say it, but I know that it's to be true if we're walking in a healthy relationship with him. Mm-hmm. If we're walking in a healthy relationship, our kids want to see God in us. Mm-hmm. And I know that was one thing that I had mentioned in the message, and it wasn't even something I wrote, but how amazing would it be, all of us, whether you have kids or you don't have kids, God willing, in the future you will, but how amazing would it be for your kids to turn around and say, my mom, my dad knew God. Yes. They didn't know about him. They knew him. I saw God in their life by the choice, how they lived, how they talked to me, the counsel they would give me, the times they would just give me a hug because words didn't need to be spoken. What does that look like? And I think if we could turn around and try to live our life that way and choose to be a light in our families, in our homes, it'll overflow into church. It'll overflow into our community, our work.
you know, and I think that's just, I don't know. I think we won't really see I think we'll be able to see some of the rewards by other people coming to God and you being able to kind of help lead them there. But I think a lot of times the reward will actually be in heaven when you see people there that might not have been there, but because of your actions, you displayed God in a way that was tangible for them to understand. And you know what? They weren't perfect, but you know what? They were pretty quick to turn around and make a wrong situation right. They were pretty quick to turn around and ask for forgiveness because they didn't want, residue within the relationship where they couldn't communicate until a month or a week went by, or even years for some people, because they don't want to deal with that stuff, but yet they want to call themselves a believer. I think that if we could change that and we saw like the real, I don't know if it's fruit or the benefit down the road, I think we would actually dig a little deeper here in this life that we're living now.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I wrote down also flickering, Gio, because that's something that really stood out. That phrase really stood out to me when I was listening to the message. Well, that and other things, but I wanted to piggyback on that one. Flickering because, and I'm talking about the new believer. I think the new believer struggles, Tony, because they don't want to be judged. And like you said earlier, they're more people pleasers than when they are God pleaser. Well, they're trying to please people more than they are trying to obey God. And I think it has to do with the life that they've already lived thus far. And I say this because I wanted to be the light. I said, I want to be this light that I started to hear about. I just didn't know what that meant. And I remembered being in my home and I had one Bible and I would keep it in my room. And if I happened to bring it out into the living room and read it, as soon as somebody showed up, I'd go hide the Bible. And because I didn't want my own family to be like, oh, Mom, like, oh, this is weird. I didn't know how they were going to receive me. And most of my children were older now. But when they were going to come over or family, I was quick to go and put the Bible away because I didn't want to be, I didn't know why. I was just like, let me just put it away. I didn't know why I did it, but I was always doing that. And then whenever somebody would say stuff, I would never correct. And I would never say, well, I don't believe this. I just smile and walk away. I was like, I'm not going to engage. But what's happened in the course of my walk is there's more Bibles. There's more than one Bible in my home, and they're in the living room, and one's in the kitchen table, and obviously there's one in my bedroom. And the boys all know, like, "Oh, Mom, what are you reading?" And I walk in, like, you don't even know what it does to me to walk in and see them reading the Bible. Like they're sitting there and actually reading. And I'm like, this is being the light in your home. And the fact, it just happened this weekend. My son was in the living room and he had music. And I don't play, I promise you guys, I don't listen to this music anymore. I never really did. I never really liked that type of music, but I don't listen to it. Like my radio's always set on Caleb. So I walk into the living room and I hear my granddaughter say, "Shh, Grandma's coming, turn that off." And I was like, what are you listening to? She's like, nothing, Grandma. And my son said, Mom, she's listening. She knows this music. And I'm like, I was like, don't be judgmental. And I just, she doesn't live with us. So so then I went in there and I said, look, I can't tell you what to do. I said, but I know that by listening to this music, it does something, especially if somebody being so young and the lyrics that it's saying. I said, and then I said, play the tape, because I wanted to see what they were watching. And they played, I said, look, what does that represent? Because I wanted them to see that. And they're like, well, it's really nothing bad. And I said, okay, you're an adult. And now I'm talking to my son. I said, you're an adult. You know that this represents something bad. Now, if you choose to do it, like there's nothing I can tell you about it. But I'm asking you, don't do this to her. She's still too young. And what she's taking in, it's not going to benefit her. And I said, and that's all I'm saying. And he goes, oh, okay. I didn't think of it that way. And my granddaughter's like, well, I do this all the time at my other grandma's house, or I see this. I can't help what she does outside my home. I really can't, but I can help what she does inside the house. But the fact that she's like, shh, Nana's coming. I was like, I believe that's being the light.
Yeah, exactly.
Because before I was flickering. I was like, well, if they're watching it, they're watching it. It really doesn't have anything to do with me. But who am I not to try to impact my granddaughter's life? I earlier in a episode, I said my great-great-grandparents didn't impact my life. And now I'm going to continue to do what they did. No, God called me for a reason. And if it was just to save my generation and do something to our bloodline where God is included and is always a part of our life, then I'm going to do that. I'm going to be that person, whether people don't like it or the people around me. But I believe that that's what, when you were talking about flickering, Tony, that's where I went back to. I'm like, wait, there was a time when I wouldn't even read the Bible. And there was a time when I didn't tell people I was going to church because I didn't want people to see me differently. And now everyone in my family knows, oh, it's Sunday or it's Wednesday. Mary's not going to be, oh, she's probably at one of her women's gatherings. But I don't care. Like, I don't mind that they know this because there was a time when I was out there partying and people they didn't say anything. So if they're going to judge me for something that I'm doing that I believe is going to change my generation. I really do. And I don't want to be that flickering light.
It's funny because when you're talking about how she was like, shh, Nana's coming. I remember one thing my dad always said growing up was, he's like, I don't care what you're doing outside the house, but when you're in my house, you're going to abide by X, Y, Z. And so there's a lot of things we couldn't do in the house, and they weren't like bad, but they weren't giving glory to God. Right. And so I think there's one thing about how it's talking about being the light in your own home. I think even setting the standard on which, hey, this is something I won't allow in my home. Because if someone's coming into your house, it would be weird if they're like, hey, I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to say this, da-da-da. But in this home, it's like, hey, we're not going to watch movies that are like this. And I think when you keep the light on and you don't flicker, like how you're sharing, even your words start to carry weight. And people will respect it. But I think when you are flickering and you're like, okay, this week you can do that, like you allow things to happen. The next week, oh, we're not doing it. What does that say to the people in the home and the people coming into the home? Right. You know what I mean?
I think too that one thing that we don't really maybe talk about in Christian circles is that like how we communicate and talk to anybody, including those closest to us. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times we want to get on our soapbox and say, no, thus saith God, you can do this, you can't do this. But what I've learned, because I went through that season and I've been on my soapbox many times, but I think if we could actually turn around and evaluate the conversation we're having with, if it's somebody that can reason with you, to turn around and make suggestions about certain things, not maybe something that takes place in your home, but like if there's a thought that they're choosing, there's something that they're choosing to do. And instead of, hey, God doesn't like you doing that, this, and that, instead of doing that, many times I've started noticing now that maybe it's because I got older or something, but now I actually put things more in a realm of suggestion. Hey, you know what? Either, hey, if I could give you a suggestion, this is what it would look like. Or maybe I'll paint the picture of what these two options are. And then at the end of the day, you need to choose. Right. And I think that if we do that, I think we actually make, again, they have to be old enough to where they could reason with you. Yeah. If it's a child, that it might be a little different unless you could break it down to their level. But I think being able to bring up, point the direction in a way that you're not pointing the finger and presenting it to them, then they'll know why they should possibly make the better choice. And it's not so condemning on their part, and they actually feel more, I think, that you're sincere and you actually cared about them instead of I'm commanding you to do this. So I think that that's one good thing to keep in mind just in our conversations.
What about, because I'm thinking about this, because we're talking about new believers, right?
Well,
so let's just say, let's say there's a family and, the father and mother just comes to the Lord, just recently came to the Lord, and their children are, let's say, elementary school, maybe teenagers, they're all, still living in the household, and they're all new to this. What would you recommend for that family? Like, what does a painted picture look like being the light? Because I know that we're giving we're making suggestions and we're explaining things, but what does it look like?
I think the easiest way, honestly, is first of all, you got to get the light on. You have to turn it on yourself, and you have to live the example that you want to suggest.
Yes.
Okay.
Apply
Exactly.
what
Okay.
you are learning, and not just be so in a rush to try to change everybody else
Right.
when God is still working to change you. And there's a reason that I believe in, and I'm glad that you brought that up, Ida, because that's something that I also wanted to touch on. There's a reason God chose, let's say, you and your family first. I don't know if it was you or Tony. I don't know who it was, but I believe that. I think God, no, I am not patient at all. I have no patience, and I'm working on that too, but still working on that. But when I think back, it's like, why'd you choose me? Like, of my family, you came and you decided to choose me. And it was like, well, because I think he knows I have a heart. I don't know why, but when I think about me, my husband has the patience. Like, he will sit there. I'm like, I would have chosen him because he has the patience with everybody else, and he will sit back and allow them to move at their own time. Me, I'm like, why don't you get it? And it was like, that was me in the beginning. But it was like, God's like, over and over. I remember hearing this. I'm not working with him. I'm working with you. And I'm like, but he doesn't get it, or she doesn't get it. And it was a constant fight between me and God. And God was like, still not working on them. I'm working on you. So I really believe that God doesn't make mistakes. He chooses somebody in the family that he knows he's going to work with. And that person is going to be able to listen and follow God's guidance. And then you can go ahead and work with the other family, but with the rest of the family members. But you need to be that example. You need to model out what you're learning. You need to apply what you go to church and learn, and start applying it in your home. And it doesn't happen overnight. So for our listener out there, it does not happen overnight. For some of us, it may not even happen the first 3 or 4 years. It's going to take some time, because whenever a foster child has gone into a home, and this is a good home, and these people love them, and they love them unconditionally, and they're doing stuff for this child, I always say, why don't you give him, he's been in foster care for 3 years. Give him 3 years before he starts to act and be the way you want him to be in this home, because for 3 years he's been lost to, in different homes. And that's how I think God is with us. So for me, there's going to be a lot of years, guys. So I believe that that's how God is. Be patient. Mary, if you continue to walk, I'm going to continue to work with you, but you be patient with everyone around you. And I believe that's how it has to be. So for this new believer, it's like, allow God to work in you. You just continue to model out what you're hearing, and being that light in your home to where the rest of the family gets it. It's not going to happen on your timing, but it's going to happen when it's right for God.
And it's not recommended. And I'm asking questions. I kind of know the answers. Well, I know the answers, but I'm just sharing this because I'm thinking of the viewers, not viewers, but the listeners out there, what they could be thinking, or maybe questions that are coming to their minds that they're not able to ask right now. So let's just say, though, how about when it comes to the children? You don't want to come cold turkey and say, oh, you know what? You can't be watching this, or you can't be listening to this. This is how it's going to be now. So they're now converting from this lifestyle to this lifestyle. And you said being patient and everything, but we don't want to go cold turkey on the children or the family. But like you said, it's just being that example, being the light, right? We don't always have to say anything. We don't always have to preach. We don't always have to mention Jesus, but it's just being that example in our attitude, our walk, our just being fruit, letting good fruit flow from us, right? And them seeing that, and them seeing the change from this is the way we used to live, but now we're going this way, so that they, by choice, want to, oh, wow, you know what? I like this. I like the way we're going. I'm going to follow, right? So that's kind of like, do you know what I'm saying with that question?
Yeah. Well, I think you both have kind of touched on something that maybe we could kind of expound on a little bit. And I think it's the transformation of our testimony, because no matter how raw it looks like in the beginning, because we're new to this thing, we're new on this journey with God. No matter how rough it might look in the beginning, over the course of time, if you're really seeking God to be your God, then your testimony is going to convey a message, and your walk, your journey is going to convey a message. Because even our kids, they know how black and white we were, so bad, where we were on that soapbox, both of us. But then there's times where we were preaching a message that we weren't always walking out. And then they saw the phoniness behind it. They saw the fakeness, the two-facedness, the hypocrisy, all of that. But then there's other seasons where we were walking it out, and then it encouraged them to get closer to God. So I think that the power of our testimony over the course of time carries some weight, because they're going to see the beginning of it. They've seen like the early stages of your walk with God, and then they're seeing over these years that, man, I see the transformation now in this person. And now it carries a lot more weight. And how you said the cold turkey thing, you could easily turn around and say, like to our grandson, we could turn around, hey, don't watch SpongeBob because da-da-da-da. We could do that. And I think we probably have.
Well, no, actually not. I haven't let him watch SpongeBob, but I did buy SpongeBob figurines for his tank.
We can talk about that too, but we don't have enough time in this podcast.
But, we could turn around and do that. But how different is it if we turn around and not just tell them, we don't watch SpongeBob, but you sit back and say, why I don't watch him. And then you start listing some of the stuff, the principles that are in there that aren't healthy for you. Then as they hear that and start seeing it for themselves, they'll choose to make the right choices, I believe. But we have to make sure that our heart is right and we're having good intentions moving forward. That's important.
This has been part 1 of Being the Light. Stay tuned for part 2 coming next week. Thank you again for listening to the Red Letters Podcast.